Here are a few times Peter Griffin was actually a hero in Family Guy, beginning with Padre de Familia. Picture this, Peter Griffin, draped in a suit that screams America louder than a bald eagle on the 4th of July.
Good morning, my American family.
Peter, where did you get that suit?
My God, you look like the Statue of Liberty's pimp.
Stomping around Quahog, preaching about the evils of illegal immigration. Okay, he's out of the suit, but still, he's convinced himself that these so-called outsiders are the root of all of his problems, stealing jobs, ruining traditions, probably even eating all of the good Pop-Tarts. But in true Family Guy fashion, life comes at Peter fast. His patriotic crusade takes a sharp turn when he discovers a shocking truth. Peter himself is an illegal immigrant, born not in the USA, but in Mexico. Turns out his mom Thelma was on a trip south of the border to, well, terminate the pregnancy when Peter made his debut. No citizenship papers, no problem, for 40 plus years, at least. Suddenly, Peter's build-a-wall rhetoric comes crumbling down like a bad game of Jenga. He loses his job at the brewery and, hilariously, can't even prove his marriage to Lois is legitimate. Things go from red, white, and blue to just plain blue real quick. With bills piling up, Lois turns to the devil himself, aka her father, Carter Pewterschmidt. Carter offers Peter a job as a servant on his estate, which sounds fancy, but it's really just code for human punching bag.
Hey, señorita! You got nice bread dough legs!
I got a blank prescription pad.
Forced to live among the very people he'd been railing against, Peter starts to see things from a new perspective. These immigrant families aren't lazy freeloaders, they're hardworking, resilient, and frankly, much nicer than Carter. Peter even bonds with them, joining in their Cinco de Mayo celebration, which, of course, involves tequila and dancing. But because Carter can't let anyone have nice things, he shows up to shut down the party, citing some obscure regulation. Peter, fueled by his newfound sense of justice and a little tequila, rallies his fellow immigrants to rebel. It's like Les Miserables, but with more piñatas and fewer depressing songs. Carter offers Peter a deal. If he calls off the rebellion, Peter will get a citizenship. It's a tempting offer, but Peter, in a rare moment of selflessness, demands citizenship for everyone. The immigrants, however, insist Peter takes the deal. They'll wait for their time. Today, Peter gets to reclaim his American dream. He reluctantly agrees, gains his citizenship, and moves his family back to their quirky, dysfunctional paradise.
I'll never forget you, Gerardo. Boy, I sure am gonna miss Ronaldo. But I'm glad I'm finally an American again.
Sure, Peter's journey starts with ignorance and bad karaoke-level patriotism, but by the end, he grows just a little. Maybe next time he'll think twice before going full Captain America without reading the fine print. Now, if you're curious what Peter brought Lois for their anniversary, let's get to Death Lives. Jewelry, a romantic dinner, a weekend getaway, all of these are great presents, but you know what else is a perfect anniversary gift? Leaving your wife hanging and going out with the fellas. Nothing screams happy anniversary like ditching your wife for a round of golf. Right? On what's supposed to be a romantic day with Lois, Peter sends her on a scavenger hunt so he can hit the greens with the guys. Classic Peter. Romance takes a backseat to his obsession with Barrington's golf course. But karma works fast in Quahog, and Peter gets struck by lightning mid-swing. This isn't your run-of-the-mill electrocution. Peter's sudden zap sends him in a one-way ticket to the afterlife where he's greeted by death himself. Think of it as a Christmas carol, but instead of ghosts, it's a snarky Grim Reaper and a clueless Peter. Death shows him a grim future where Lois leaves him due to his neglect, and things spiral so badly that Peter takes his own life 2 years post-divorce. Yeah, dark, right? But this is Family Guy, so buckle up for some laughs along the way. Before Peter can brush it off,
What are you doing? You can't get in that way.
I'm sure as hell not going in the back door.
Death takes him on a journey through time, showing him just how much of a disaster his courtship with Lois was. We're talking the Bachelor levels of bad dates. Peter's first impression on Lois's father, Carter Pewterschmidt, is a train wreck. Carter responds by knocking Peter out and dumping him into the ocean because in Quahog, a polite no thank you just doesn't cut it. Enter Quagmire, serving on a Navy aircraft carrier to rescue Peter in a moment that's so homoerotic that it looks like a cutscene from the original Top Gun. But the chaos doesn't stop there. Peter hitches a ride back to Rhode Island with Cleveland, only to be chased by the Ku Klux Klan along the way.
That truck's coming up on us awful fast.
Despite all this, he sticks to his guns, refusing Carter's bribe of $1 million to stay away from Lois. Maybe love, or sheer stubbornness, really does conquer all.
No deal. Lois may be worth $1 million to you, but to me, she's worthless. I love her, Mr. Pewterschmidt.
Flash forward to the present, Peter finally realizes he's been taking Lois for granted. With a new perspective on life and marriage, he pulls out the ultimate romantic gesture, convincing Peter Frampton to serenade Lois with their song, Baby, I Love Your Way. Lois is over the moon, and for once, Peter nails the anniversary game. It's a rare, heartwarming moment that proves even Peter can get it right when it really counts. Of course, this wouldn't be Family Guy without a dark twist. Death, fresh off his favor to Peter, ends up on a date from hell with Amy, a pet shop assistant. After enduring her relentless rant about animal rights, he has enough and ends things the only way Death knows how, by literally touching her. 1 second she's droning on, the next she's gone. Check please. Now, let's hop on to Let's Go to the Hop. When James Woods High turns into a scene straight out of Breaking Bad Amphibian Edition, Peter Griffin steps up in the most ridiculous way possible. A plane carrying hallucinogenic toads crashes, and the local teens quickly figure out that licking these amphibians will take them on a magical mystery tour. Naturally, Lois and Peter freak out. Peter even tells Chris what happened to him when he tried drugs once as a kid.
Things got way too real. Holy crap, I am freaking out.
But while most parents would go to the PTA route, Peter decides to handle things by going full undercover. Enter Lando Griffin, a leather-clad, smooth-talking student with a bad attitude and zero chill. In just a short time, Lando takes over the school. In an attempt to be Fonzie, he smashes the jukebox, but because kids love violence, he instantly becomes the hottest thing at James Woods High. Even crazier, after an Olivia Newton-like performance, Peter convinces the entire school that licking toads isn't just lame, it's for losers. And just like that, Peter solves the school's drug problem. But as always, Peter being Peter, things don't stop there. Meg, hungry for a taste of high school fame, tells everyone that Lando asked her to this winter snowball.
Meg, you got a date? Oh, wait till I tell your mother. Who I'm looking forward to meeting.
For a moment, it seems like Meg's about to get her Cinderella moment, but nope. Peter's newfound popularity gets the best of him, and when Queen Bee Connie D'Amico invites him instead, he leaves Meg in the dust faster than you can say tragic prom date. This even gets Lois going, and she tries to intervene.
I forbid you from going to that dance.
You can't tell me what to do. You're not my real mom.
But our boy has lost it. Meg's devastated, and for a second, you might think Peter is about to become the villain of this story. But just when you're ready to write him off, he pulls a classic Family Guy move, redeeming himself in the most dramatic way possible. At the snowball, when Peter and Connie are crowned king and queen, Peter takes the mic. He gives a heartfelt and wildly unnecessary speech, telling everyone that Meg was his real first choice. And just like that, Meg goes from zero to hero, basking in the glow of her newfound popularity. Lando, on the other hand, makes his grand exit by driving off into the night, never to be seen again. But the legend of Lando doesn't end there. The next day, the school announces that Lando tragically died after driving off Dead Man's Curb. There's no body, but the cops figure, close enough. Meg's left with a small bump in her social status, and Peter gets to go back to being the clueless dad we all love to hate. It's a ridiculous, over-the-top episode that manages to be both hilarious and oddly touching. But Peter also has a thing in his heart for the less abled among us. Get ready for ready, willing, and disabled. When life throws Joe Swanson off his game, Peter Griffin does what any true friend would do. He turns Joe's slump into an all-out training montage. Rocky had Mickey, but Joe, he gets Peter, a man who thinks mixing steroids and motivational speeches about George W. Bush is the secret to athletic success. But wait, let's rewind. It all starts after Joe fails to catch a thief at a charity car wash, leaving him spiraling into a pit of self-doubt. Enter Peter with all the grace of a wrecking ball. Peter's brilliant plan: enter Joe in the Special People's Games, a competition designed to highlight the talents of athletes with disabilities. Of course, Peter's coaching style is a unique blend of tough love and absolute chaos. The prep goes pretty great, even though Joe refuses to take any steroids like Peter wanted him to, but as a good friend, Peter helps Joe by spiking his water with some illegal steroids he stole. Joe dominates the games, clinching the gold medal by winning the final race in a pretty dramatic fashion and becoming a local hero. Now, that was the part where Peter was a good guy, but to be fair, the episode doesn't end here. Now for the bad part. Soon, he's signing endorsement deals and starring in Rolling Courage, the Joe Swanson story, a made-for-TV movie so inaccurate, it makes Bohemian Rhapsody look like a documentary. Peter, of course, isn't happy with his portrayal as a lazy slob who discouraged Joe, especially when in real life, he was the one who pushed Joe to succeed, albeit in the most morally questionable ways. Jealousy sets in, and Peter's need for attention kicks into overdrive. He fakes his own disability, complete with a hilariously bad video of him running over a scarecrow version of himself, hoping to snag his own slice of fame. Naturally, Tom Tucker isn't buying it, and Peter's dream of being Quahog's next inspirational icon crashes harder than Joe's wheelchair after a week-long jump. In a fit of envy, Peter reveals Joe's steroid secret, turning his friend's triumph into a public scandal. Joe's medal is stripped, and his confidence takes another nosedive. But in the end, everything actually turns out fine when he recognizes the thief from the beginning of the episode, and manages to actually catch him this time.
Say, what happened to the car wash thief?
Ironically, I severed his spine when I landed on him.
Ready, willing, and disabled perfectly captures Peter's chaotic brand of heroism. He may ruin everything in the end, but at least his heart was in the right place, for a little while anyway. Now, you think it's hard being Peter's friend? Well, just try being Peter's daughter. This is an episode from one of the earlier seasons. Remember back when Peter was still kinda trying to be a good dad? Oh, you forgot? I can't blame you, it's been pretty long since then. When flash flood hits Quahog, the Griffin family scrambles to evacuate. But Peter, ever the picture of priorities, sends Meg to fetch a case of beer and a sandwich from their waterlogged kitchen. What could possibly go wrong? Well, everything. Meg's blouse gets snagged underwater and she starts to drown. Just when things seem like they can't get worse, Peter jumps into action, diving in to rescue her. In a rare moment of genuine heroism, he pulls Meg to safety, proving that even Peter knows when it's time to step up. At the hospital, things take a dramatic turn. Meg is in a coma, and for once, Peter isn't cracking jokes or farting on anyone. He's riddled with guilt, reflecting on the endless list of terrible things he's done to Meg over the years.
Hey, Meg, you got something on your shirt.
From fart pranks to constant mockery, Peter promises himself and an unconscious Meg that if she wakes up, he'll turn over a new leaf and be the dad she deserves. And wouldn't you know it, Meg wakes up and Peter makes good on his promise. Kind of. For possibly the first time in Family Guy history, Peter treats Meg with genuine kindness. He's attentive, supportive, and borderline smothering. When Meg starts dating Michael, a charming maid student she met at the hospital, Peter's overprotective instincts kick in. To say Peter's reaction is over the top would be an understatement. He interrogates Michael like he's the lead detective in a Law & Order spin-off, and even spies on their dates, channeling full-on helicopter parent energy. Despite Lois's best efforts to keep Peter grounded, he spirals into full dad mode paranoia. Michael, understandably creeped out by Peter's antics, decides to break things off with Meg. Devastated, Meg drops a bombshell on the family. She's pregnant. Peter's reaction? Classic shotgun wedding. He storms over to Michael's house, ready to force him down the aisle. Surprisingly, Michael steps up, agreeing to marry Meg. It looks like things might actually work out until the wedding day. In true Family Guy fashion, the ceremony takes a turn. Just before walking down the aisle, Meg confides in Lois that she's not actually pregnant. Turns out she just got her period. Lois urges her to tell the truth, but when Meg comes clean, Michael bolts faster than you can say cold feet.
I'm not pregnant.
What?
Cue an awkward but oddly touching moment where Peter, despite his flaws, steps in to comfort Meg. He admits he pushed too hard, apologizes, and promises to do better. From risking his life to save Meg to his hilariously misguided attempts at being a protective dad, Peter shows that beneath his bumbling exterior lies a father who, in his own dysfunctional way, deeply cares. And speaking of fathers, let's check the courtship of Stewie's father. Stewie Griffin isn't exactly what you'd call a daddy's boy. In fact, his usual vibe toward Peter hovers somewhere between disdain and mild indifference. But when Lois insists that Peter make an effort to bond with his youngest child, things take an unexpectedly chaotic turn. How does Peter decide to build their relationship? By teaming up with Stewie to torment Lois. The classic Griffin logic.
Hey, Lois, you want some beans with that, right?
Oh, I misjudged you, fat man.
At first, the pair bond over their shared love of pranks, which escalate quickly from harmless antics to borderline felonies. Peter and Stewie rig a car to send Lois plunging into a lake, and they laugh like maniacs as she flails around in the water. But when Lois puts her foot down and punishes Stewie, the baby feels betrayed. Peter's refusal to stand up for his tiny partner in crime earns him Stewie's cold shoulder. Peter, ever the king of grand gestures, decides that the only way to fix things is to go big. He whisks Stewie away on a father-son trip to Disney World, and in true Peter fashion, their visit goes from magical to mayhem in record time. Stewie, ever the wanderer, gets himself captured and thrown into a bizarre Disney attraction called It's a Tiny, Tiny World. There, he's forced to perform like a theme park hostage. Peter surprisingly pulls off a daring rescue mission, an Indiana Jones rescue mission, literally. He punches out Michael Eisner, because why not, and saves Stewie from a fate worse than death, endless kitties singing. As they make their daring escape, they're chased by crocodiles and Disney henchmen, but by the time they're back on the road home, Stewie's faith in his dad is fully restored. Everything ends on a surprisingly wholesome note. For a brief moment, Peter actually seems like the dad Stewie always wanted, before inevitably screwing it up again in the next episode. Like, for example, Road to Rupert. Peter Griffin losing his driver's license was probably one of the few times he had to face actual consequences for his actions. After pulling off a reckless Evel Knievel stunt that ends in a multi-car pileup, Joe revokes his license. Stuck at home and driving Lois up the wall, Peter is reluctantly assigned Meg as his personal chauffeur. At first, it's a nightmare for both of them. Peter treats Meg like a glorified taxi driver, constantly barking orders, and Meg is understandably miserable about the whole arrangement. But things take a wild turn when Meg, in a fit of road rage, snaps during a minor fender bender. The other driver makes the mistake of mouthing off, and Meg responds by giving him a beatdown that would make John Wick proud. Peter, witnessing this, is stunned. For the first time ever, he sees Meg in a different light, not as the family's punching bag, but as a total badass. From that moment, Peter and Meg actually start to bond. They become an unlikely dynamic duo, causing chaos around Quahog. Whether they're terrorizing other drivers or pulling ridiculous pranks, Peter finally begins to enjoy spending time with his daughter. And Meg, she gets a taste of what it's like to actually be appreciated by her dad, even if their bonding comes at the expense of innocent bystanders. Eventually, Peter gets his license back, and Meg fears their newfound connection will disappear faster than a Quahog TV anchor at a scandal. But Peter surprises her with a rare moment of sincerity. He promises that while he'll still rag on her in front of the family, deep down, she's his best friend.
What I want is a fresh glass of better daughter.
Hey.
For a character who spends most of his time making Meg's life miserable, it's a surprisingly touching gesture. Oh, don't worry, he's back at making everyone's life hell in Peter Caviar Eater. Peter Griffin living the life of a wealthy aristocrat? You already know this is going to be a train wreck with champagne flutes and lobster tails flying everywhere. When Lois inherits her late Aunt Margaret's sprawling Newport mansion, Cherrywood Manor, the family steps into a world of opulence that is about as comfortable for Peter as a pair of 3 sizes too small khakis. Their introduction to the mansion is suitably grand, complete with staff that sings a song about kissing the owner's ass. Peter goes all into the mansion, selling the old Griffin house in Quahog without telling Lois. It's classic Peter, reckless, impulsive, and wildly optimistic that things will magically work out, but hey, who wouldn't want to be the lord of a manor? Things will go smoothly, right? Well, Peter's beer-guzzling, TV-loving demeanor is a far cry from the snooty sophistication expected in Newport High society.
I can't believe they kicked me out of the yacht club. I barely had time to stuff Lois's salmon in my jacket.
Face it, Peter, you have a knack for saying the wrong thing.
As Peter fumbles through his new life, Stewie, ever the opportunist, fits right in. Ordering the servants around like a tiny dictator, he even has them duel for his amusement. Meanwhile, Peter's antics grow increasingly desperate, culminating in him begging Brian for a crash course in refinement. What follows is a hilarious training montage complete with Brian deploying shock therapy to help Peter suppress his natural instinct to shove entire plates of food into his mouth. By the time the Griffins attend a high society auction, Peter is remarkably transformed, or so it seems. He manages to fake his way through conversations with the elite, kinda impressing, but also disappointing Lois. But then, in true Peter fashion, he bids an eye-watering $100 million on a vase, believing himself to be a secret Rockefeller. Lois is horrified, and understandably so. Her initial excitement about Cherrywood quickly gives way to dread as she watches her family morph into everything she left Newport to escape. It takes Brian smashing Peter's prized Star Wars collector's glass and comparing him to a sellout Lando Calrissian to snapping back to reality. Unfortunately, Peter is still on the hook for that $100 million. Desperate to save the manor, Peter uncovers a stash of photographs revealing that Cherrywood Manor was once a high-end brothel frequented by American icons like Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant. This discovery not only rescues the family financially, but gives Peter the last laugh. He gleefully sells one of the photos to the tabloids, repurchases their old home, and revels in the irony that the same snobs who look down on him descend from a long line of, well, let's just say professionals.
Because all that's important is that I love you.
No, because your ancestors were nothing but a bunch of pimps and whores.
By the end of the episode, Peter learns absolutely nothing, because that's what makes him Peter. Still, his chaotic journey through high society is an amusing testament to his knack for turning disasters into oddly triumphant moments. Yes, Peter is a gift that keeps on giving, unless we're talking about turkey guys. You know how you're supposed to have a turkey ready a day before Thanksgiving? Well, that isn't an option when you have drunken Peter and Brian Griffin in the house. Naturally, Lois sends him and Brian on a frantic mission to replace it.
We have to decide who gets to ride in the cart and who has to push it.
Well, I'm smaller, so...
The decision has been made.
Their turkey quest begins in the usual Griffin style, wildly unprepared. Every store in town is wiped clean of turkeys, and the duo is forced to expand their search radius. After a series of failures, they finally stumble upon the last turkey at the Highland Park Market. Victory? Not quite. Peter's reckless driving lands them in a pond where Peter prioritizes saving the turkey over Brian. Classic Peter logic, keep the bird, nearly kill the dog. With their only phone waterlogged, they hitch a ride from a store clerk, but Peter's bus antics get them booted. Things go from bad to very, very, very bad when a hitchhiking attempt ends with their turkey stolen by a shady driver. As tensions rise, Brian finally explodes, accusing Peter of ruining everything. Peter, ever the instigator, admits he framed Brian for eating the original turkey. At this point, their Thanksgiving seems as doomed as Brian's tolerance for Peter's nonsense. Meanwhile, back at the Griffin house, things are unraveling fast. Lois tries to keep the Thanksgiving spirit alive as Stewie convinces Chris to step up as the man of the house. Predictably, Chris crumbles under the pressure and starts acting like a capital W weirdo. Back on the road, Peter and Brian stumble upon a zoo, and Peter's solution is simple.
We break into the zoo, steal a turkey, bring it home. We're heroes.
Brian protests, but logic and Peter don't exactly go hand in hand. What follows is a madcap chase through the zoo. Lions, flamingos, and a turkey on the loose. It's pure Griffin chaos.
Where'd he go? He's not in here.
When Brian falls into the lion pen, Peter surprisingly steps up, saving him with a flamingo turned makeshift fishing pole. It's a moment of rare heroism, reminding us that even Peter has his good days. With their turkey secured, they hijack the zoo's tram and finally make it back home. Just as Stewie prepares to deliver a turkey-free feast, Peter bursts in with the bird. Everything seems to be falling into place until Peter, faced with the prospect of butchering the turkey, has a sudden change of heart. In a surprising twist, he opts for, well, we can say compassion. But before the turkey can enjoy its guest of honor status, Chris stumbles in with a shotgun declaring Thanksgiving saved. The dinner proceeds as planned, complete with a turkey on the table, and the Griffins end the holiday in typical fashion, slightly traumatized but fed. In a final absurd touch, Peter jokes that 4 years later he and Lois divorced, and Stewie died because in Family Guy, why not end on a dark, unnecessary punchline? Okay, from divorce and child tragedy, let's move on to canine euthanasia and Brian, Portrait of a Dog. Quahog is cooking under a relentless heat wave, and the Griffins are melting in their unair-conditioned home. With everyone on edge, Peter hatches a plan to beat the heat. He'll win $500 in a local dog show and buy an air conditioner. There's just one catch. He needs Brian to perform tricks. While the rest of the family rallies behind the idea, Brian, proud and dignified as ever, is less enthusiastic about prancing around like some circus act. Still, he begrudgingly agrees. After all, what's a little public humiliation when your family's comfort is at stake?
Okay, let's go over the commands. Sit.
But the dog show turns out to be more than Brian can stomach. As he can perform basic tricks, Peter can't resist pushing things too far, attempting to top it off with a classic bone-on-the-nose stunt. For Brian, this is the final straw. He refuses to perpetuate the stereotype of the obedient dog and storms off in a huff, leaving the Griffins not only sweaty, but empty-handed. The ride home isn't any better. Peter and Brian argue, with Peter accusing Brian of being ungrateful and selfish. Brian snaps, deciding he's had enough of being treated like a second-class family member. He gets out of the car, determined to strike out on his own. But life as an independent dog in Quahog isn't easy. Almost immediately, Brian is ticketed for violating the local leash law, a fine Peter refuses to pay, widening the rift between them. Lois tries to mediate, but tensions remain high as Peter doubles down, eventually calling Brian a bad dog. To add insult to injury, Peter replaces Brian with a feral kitten whose violent tendencies leave the family constantly on edge.
We'll get a lovable kitty cat, and everybody will feel a lot better. Kitty, kitty.
Meanwhile, Brian struggles to adjust to life without the Griffins. He's treated as little more than a nuisance wherever he goes, booted from public places, and mocked by locals. The situation reaches a boiling point when Brian, now living in desperation, defends himself against a man who mistreats him. The altercation lands Brian in the pound, facing a grim sentence.
Oh, he's cute. Aren't you precious? Lethal injection. Next.
The Griffins are devastated to learn of Brian's fate. Lois is heartbroken, but Peter, realizing the depths of his mistakes, springs into action.
Dear MacGyver, enclosed is a rubber band, a paper clip, and a drinking straw. Please save my dog.
He also rushes to court to save Brian, delivering an impassioned speech about loyalty, friendship, and all the ways Brian has been an integral part of their family. However, this isn't exactly a few good men. The court remains unmoved, finding it hard to sympathize with a man crying over his talking dog. But Peter isn't done yet. With time running out, he turns to a method that's as morally questionable as it is effective: bribery. Slipping each juror a $20 bill, he manages to convince them to drop the charges.
I'll give you each $20.
Deal, he can go.
It's not exactly noble, but hey, it gets the job done. Brian is released, and Peter welcomes him back with open arms. Once home, the violent kitten gets unceremoniously evicted, restoring balance to the household. Peter may not always get things right, but when it counts, he's willing to go the extra mile for his family, even if it involves bribing half the town. For Brian, it's a reminder that despite their differences, the Griffins are his family, and Peter, in his own bizarre way, will always have his back no matter how things go wrong. And things do get really wrong when Mr. Griffin goes to Washington. Life is good for Peter Griffin when the El Dorado Cigarette Company buys out the toy factory where he works. Out of nowhere, he's promoted to company president, complete with a mountain of perks, lobster dinners every night, a personal lackey to boost his ego, and even Martha Stewart running household operations for Lois. It's every man's fantasy until it's not. Turns out, El Dorado's true goal is as sinister as a Saturday morning cartoon villain. They've started manufacturing toys specifically designed to get kids hooked on smoking. Lois spots the problem immediately, but Peter, blinded by his cushy new lifestyle, waves her off. Why worry about ethics when you're enjoying lobster for breakfast?
Trust me, Peter, the last thing we want is to get kids to start smoking.
Even Meg is enjoying the perks of her dad's new job, standing next to a hired ugly friend to make herself look better in comparison. But the moral cracks begin to show when Brian, sick of enabling Peter's cluelessness, vows to quit smoking, and Stewie casually lights up like he's auditioning for Mad Men. When the company decides to send Peter to Washington, D.C. to push their agenda, Lois has had enough. She and the kids follow him just in time to witness Peter's attempt to charm Congress with his, unique brand of logic. For a while, it works. Peter's speeches resonate with the equally ridiculous lawmakers, but during a key moment in his pitch, he hears Stewie coughing in the gallery, and just like that, Peter has an epiphany. Yes, really. He tosses out his scripted propaganda and tells Congress to fine El Dorado into oblivion. Congress delivers with a staggering penalty, $infinity billion. The room cheers. Of course, they dial it back to a more feasible $100 million, bankrupting the company and putting an end to their kid-targeting schemes. The episode closes on a typical Family Guy note of absurdity, with the cast delivering an oddly specific PSA. It's a stark reminder of the show's commitment to mixing dark humor with its moral lessons. Yeah. This time around, Peter stumbles into doing the right thing, not because of his smarts, but because even he can't stomach the thought of a baby hooked on smokes. Peter's chaotic energy saves the day, proving that sometimes even the most absurd people can surprise you. Okay, you got that? Let's take a look at our final episode, and that's Get Stewy. Peter, being Peter, decides that tossing a ball around with Chris sounds like an Olympic-level challenge. The journey from couch to backyard nearly puts him in a coma, prompting Lois to suggest he lose weight. Naturally, Peter scoffs at the idea of doing it the old-fashioned way. Diet and exercise? Pass.
You can increase your exercise.
Pass.
Switch to a vegan diet.
I'd rather die.
Or quit drinking.
Instead, he opts for lap band surgery, a shortcut to slimness with zero effort involved. Post-surgery, Peter's sudden weight loss leaves him with more loose skin than a deflated balloon animal. He doesn't let that stop him, though. Embracing his new look, he ditches his family responsibilities in favor of living his best life. The only problem is, instead of a hunk, Peter actually looks like a windsock that somehow gained sentience. Lois, meanwhile, is less than thrilled. Her hopes that Peter's new physique would mean more quality time with Chris are dashed.
You were supposed to be helping Chris with his science fair project.
But Peter is about to learn that escaping dad duties isn't so easy. He begrudgingly shows up at Chris's science fair, where he's roped into being the kite for Chris's project. True to Family Guy form, things go hilariously south when Peter gets struck by lightning. The zap miraculously reverts him back to his original size. Peter might be back to square one, but hey, at least he's grounded. Literally and figuratively. Yeah, we started on a lightning strike and we're finishing on one. It's like Peter, even when he does the right thing, is cursed. Hey, speaking of, if you want more great Family Guy content, make sure to look at our video about the cursed Family Guy episodes.